Hi, I'm Irene. I'm an addict. Nice to see you all again. I hope you had a great day. So obviously, I'm sure you guys have seen the PowerPoints, but this is basically a HRP overview, and it basically, just for anybody who might not know, the HRP consists of 4 NA members who are elected at the World Service Conference. And so their charge over the cycle is to identify members for nomination. So they have a very careful and considered process, and the members that they would be nominating for would be for either the World Board or the Human Resource Panel or the co-facilitators. And this was a different process since 1998 when the process was reformed. So let's go on to the next one. Okay, so so I'm sure you're familiar with the World Pool. So that's a database where there's information, obviously anybody wants to put their information in the database if they're interested in the service. And that has been around for quite a few years now. And so basically the HRP and the World Pool, they're 2 components of a system that was intended to provide a new approach to identify and select trusted servants. So that's the World Pool, which still exists. Now, the RBZ process is basically, so that's regional board and zonal candidates. So people can enter that from the World Pool. The criteria for a world level service is 8 years clean and obviously willingness to serve. And then also regions, zones, and the World Board can nominate potential candidates. So all of them are currently, they're evaluated by the HRP. So the HRP would interview the candidates and also send them written questions. And so this is a process that goes over, the course of several months. And then the most qualified candidates are then moved forward for nomination at the World Service Conference. There you go. So they have been very busy since it started in 2006. There's been 43 World Board members, and 41 had at least one RBZ recommendation. So altogether, 74 World Service Conference trusted servants. Those are from the 3 areas: Board, HRP, and COFAX have been elected since 2006. And 54 had an RBZ recommendation. So we can still elect from the floor, nominate from the floor, but that has shown to not be as successful. The World Service Conference seems to prefer if it comes through the process of being vetted by the HRP, and only one person, I believe that was in 2002, was elected directly from the floor. So, so anyway, based on all of this, and for the first time, the HRP asked all members who wish to be considered for nomination at World Service Conference 2023 to acquire RBZ recommendation. With this experience and information as a foundation, the HRP believes that they'll be ready to suggest a few changes to the process for decision at the World Service Conference 2023. Obviously, they're just going to be looking for that for the next cycle. Obviously, this cycle, everything has gone along as always. So once the election process is completed, the HRP are planning on asking the conference to change the policy to require that all the candidates do go through the RBZ recommendation. So they will be asking that at this next conference. So if that happens, the World Pool would no longer be needed to collect information on members. So that would be more likely be repurposed, the database based to collect information on RBZ candidates each conference cycle. So a World Service Conference decision to rely on regions, boards, and the zones to forward candidates would also retire the process that provides for nominations from the floor. So it's basically looking to unify the price process, make it more streamlined, and to sort of basically use what seems to have been best practice, what has been working well. So the next slide, I believe, is about the World Pool. So the World Pool was originally set up to identify trusted servants, and at one time also to look for people for work groups. And just to be clear, the HRP is not responsible for creating the work groups. That's the World Board. And what we have been doing in most recent years is we basically put it out through, all our communication methods with the CPs that a work group is forming, and we ask people to express their interest in that work group. And then the World Board has a lengthy discussion on this. And for many of you who have been on work groups, I'm sure you've seen how diverse they are. And we try to get a diverse group as possible, both geographically, gender, experience-wise. Like, for example, I was just on the seating work group, and we had someone from Africa, Europe, South America, and North America, and a mix of men and women, and also a mix of people with varying degrees of experience at the conference. So, and we also like to change people. I know in the past, sometimes it's happened that people have been on several work groups, but we'd really prefer not, that anybody who wanted to be on a work group would get that opportunity to serve. So that's the World Pool. So basically, that's the report that the HRB has issued in the CAR. And they also have put out a video with two of the HRP members speaking on the video, where you have your videos and PowerPoints. And they're not asking for any decisions at the moment. They're just trying to keep us all up to date. And yeah, so that's what their presentation says. Now, we have a member here, Craig, if he'd like to add anything in on that.
No, thanks, Irene, for that. And I think that in our report and the conference agenda report and the video pretty much explains everything, unless someone has some questions. We tried to be consistent throughout the cycle in communicating with everyone and making sure everyone had the same information.
Great, Craig, thank you. Thanks very much. Is there questions? Maybe we have some questions out there.
We have a question here.
Forgive me, can you tell me what RBZ is again?
Regions, board, zones.
Thank you.
My name is Brenda and I'm an ag. I'm just wondering if the conference passes a 3-year cycle, and we've talked earlier about extending the World Board term limits. That's what the conference will decide also. Will that affect HRP? And if it does, how will that affect the people on that or their decision-making processes? Does that make sense?
Sure. Craig, go ahead.
Yep. Thanks, Brenda. How you doing? Thanks for your zone service this weekend and setting this up and hosting. It will not affect the HRP panel and the members, because per the World Guide to World Service, HRP serves from cycle to cycle. Now, the flip side of that is everyone we've interviewed this cycle, part of our interview summary and process, or script, if you will, is that we've indicated to everyone that potential for the change in cycles could affect their term. And they just needed to be aware of that. So we've made that known to everyone we've interviewed. Did that answer that, Brenda? Okay.
Paul?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Irene. Thank you, Craig. I would just like to add something which may give some inputs to people's decisions on this motion. Irene mentioned that, and as an HRP member, now I'm currently a board member, I'd just like to add something to what Irene said, which was that there has only been one member of the board who's been elected from the floor. That member was me. So that may make you think one way or another about this motion. I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Full disclosure, Paul.
Absolutely. Hands up.
Thank you. Matt?
My question for Craig is, where are you at in that process for this cycle? Have you already conducted most of the interviews? Are you getting close to the recommendations? But where are you at now is just for a frame of reference of how long this takes you guys.
We have completed all of our interviews. The interviews started in November, and everyone who came through an RBZ before us, they selected their own dates for the interviews to be, conducive to when they were available and all those kind of things. We just finished a couple of weeks ago. So it ran from November to January. And that's just because, and I have to kind of qualify that. We took a break during the holiday season, okay? Just to give everyone a break and to not, give that time of the year for people and their families, including us, our own families. So we picked back up in January with a couple of people that actually rescheduled, and then a couple of people that had pushed their, that was the date that they chose in January. So, and I needed to add something to what Paul just said, is that and it's in the report, even though he was that one member, from our perspective, when you look at it, the challenge with that is that anyone who's nominated from the floor has not had the opportunity to go through what you guys ask people to go through, which is the HRP process. They haven't been interviewed. None of that happened. So we feel like you guys support the process of going through HRP rather than someone being just nominated on the floor of the conference. Just some backstory to that. And it's in the report.
Craig, if you wouldn't mind, I would just like to add to what you said. Actually, I wasn't nominated from the floor, but I did not get a nomination from an RBZ. I was actually someone who self-nominated. So I went through the whole process. And I believe that self-nomination would now be taken out of the process according to this motion. Is that correct?
Yeah, maybe we were, and it's not, let me clarify something else. This is not a motion. The HRP, we're not putting forth a motion, just so that clarification is out there.
Thank you.
What I was alluding to was one person being nominated from the floor, so what we're suggesting, and we've suggested that this cycle, and our regions and zones have cooperated with that just based on the data. Just look at the data. This is your data, not the board's, not the HRP's data. And so we suggested everybody get an RBZ, and we are discouraging anyone from nominating anyone from the floor at the World Service Conference. And so that's what and most people, we've had no input or no negative input or no opposition or pushback, whatever word you want to use, in the whole cycle, because we've been reporting this throughout. So we believe that people support the process of everybody going through RBZ, going through the HRP process, and then you guys having an opportunity to get their conference profile ahead of time, which will be in the March/April conference report whenever that goes out. So that's what we believe is like the best approach based on the data and based on the your practices through the years. So thanks, Paul. Yeah, we're on the same page.
Thank you. Yes, that's really helpful, Craig. So that would remove the opportunity for someone who missed or wasn't able to get an RBZ recommendation to actually be put forward by the HRP into the process and be interviewed and so on. Is that correct? That's correct, because we believe, let me just say this, make this point, and then because I don't want to hold up or belabor anything that's already in the report. We believe that the vetting for people to serve at World Service should not happen at HRP. The vetting should happen at home, because that's where people know each other. So people go to an RSC meeting, a Regional Service Committee meeting, and say, hey, my name is Paul, and I would like to be considered for the World Board or the Human Resource Panel, or to be a co-facilitator at World Service. And so what we've done is, and I'm saying this because I want to kind of encourage all of you to try to establish this. We provided sample questions to everyone so that if Paul shows up to an RSC and wants to be nominated, we would encourage you to, even though you may know Paul, he's a known quantity, great guy, done service in the region, blah, blah, blah. We would encourage you to ask him some of the questions that we provided to you, because here's why. Some of those same questions or similar questions are going to be asked during the interview. So it gives him a chance to practice a little bit and, you know, kind of think about his responses, but it also gives you a chance to see this is somebody that you're going to be voting for. And the fourth concept speaks to that. Be careful about who you elect, because it's you they will be serving. So we believe this is a good way to incorporate like some of the principles in the fourth concept in establishing leadership.
Any other questions?
Many interviews were done.
There was a question from the floor of how many interviews were done.
Thank you guys for allowing me to serve you the last couple of cycles on HRP. Thank you.
Oh, Craig, I don't know, Craig, are you able to say that? They're asking how many interviews were done. I don't know, can you give the number or?
32.
Narrowed down to one.
Narrowed down to what? I'm a parrot here, so. Yeah, I'm not sure that you got me. So Craig, narrow down to what? How many are you considering putting out?
There are 5 World Board seats available for election. 3 of those people running for those 5 seats are current board members running for re-election. So those 5 open seats. 3 of those seats are occupied by current board members, and they're running for re-elections. There is 1 COFAC position open. We have 2 co-facilitators at the World Service Conference. We rotate so that there's always an experienced member working with the newer member. In this case, we have that 1 seat open, and my mind just went blank. Mario is one of the co-facilitators, along with, I know he's gonna kill me.
Daniel.
Thank you. Don't slap me, Daniel, when you see me in a couple of weeks, okay? Don't slap me. Yeah, I'm getting old. I just forgot that name. Anyway, so there's 1 seat available for that. On the Human Resource Panel, there are 2 seats available. The current HRP is myself, Nathaniel from Australia, Arnie from Portugal, and Laura from New Mexico. And so me and Nat are rotating off. Our term is over. And Arnie and Laura are the HRP members that will be going forward. And we will be electing 2 new members to serve with them. I hope they got that, Barry.
Yep, they got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Looks like we got one more question. Kind of.
My name is Brenda and I'm a delegate from Nebraska. I have never been to a face-to-face borough conference. So in 2020, we did elections online, or, we had an e-poll thing. Is that how they do, is that how we're gonna do it this year? Do they vote ahead of time? I mean, I don't know how this works. I've never been to a face-to-face before. Is it different than the interim?
At the last conference, we put in place a new process for elections, just trying to be, again, in the spirit of continuous improvement and being more efficient. And people had a couple of days to vote on their candidates. And then at the end of that predetermined time, the elections were closed and they were voting electronically. And then the votes were tabulated electronically. And I know Jim is on here and a couple of HRP members from past out here. We moved away from hand counting, okay, and just trying to be more efficient and to be more cognizant of the time and giving people an opportunity to think about it. So that's how it worked, Brenda. As far as I know, there are no change. Everyone, the input we got at that conference were you guys, delegates, board members were happy with that process and pleased with how it worked. And so unless something strikes us or just out of the blue, I'm assuming and expecting that same process at this year's conference.
Thank you.
And I'll just add one thing for anybody who's new and it's their first conference. And this will all be explained, and the HRP give a very excellent, sorry, this is Rudy, everybody. He wants to get in on the action. Off you go. And the HRP explained the whole process before we do it, so nobody will be left in the dark. Back in the old days, we used to basically get paper resumes there, which we were asked to destroy afterwards, because obviously the resumes contain a lot of very personal information about people. And in order to guard people's anonymity, the delegates there present get the resumes. They're now delivered electronically, but this is basically a decision that you're asked to, that you need your region to allow you to make without having to send these resumes back to your region, because they're basically confidential. Obviously not everybody whose resume you get will be elected, and I'm sure a lot of us want to guard our anonymity and don't want lots of our personal details spread all over the fellowship. So like that's one thing that the HRP will explain to everybody, and then we get the resumes, and you have, as Craig said, a few days to consider them and discuss them with your alternates, and then make your choices.